February 26, 1962. Dear Miss Kelly, this is in response to your letter of February 20th, 1962. Your offer to go on a space mission is commendable, and we are very grateful. But this is to advise that we have no existing program concerning women astronauts, nor do we contemplate any such plan. We appreciate your interest and support of the nation's space program. Sincerely, Obi Lloyd, Jr., Director of Public Information at NASA. March 13, 1962. Dear Miss Hepburn, President Kennedy has asked this office to thank you for your recent letter. Your willingness to serve your country as a volunteer woman astronaut is commendable. However, while many women are employed in other capacities in the space program, some of them in extremely important scientific posts, we have no present plans to employ women on space flights because of the degree of scientific and physical training that is required. We appreciate your interest in and support of the nation's space program. Sincerely, Obi Lloyd Jr., Director of Office of Public Services and Information of NASA.
2, 1, 0, all engine running. Liftoff, we have a liftoff, 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. 40 feet down, 2.5. Picking up some dust. 30 feet, 2.5 down. Break shadow. 4 forward. 4 forward. That's one small step for man. One giant leap for mankind. Tony, this is so great you can't believe it.
And indeed, that was a small step for a man and a giant leap for mankind, but it was only for men, because sadly, not a single woman was given the chance to walk on the moon. Until today, only 12 men have walked in the moon's surface. Hello, my name is Nahum, and I'm very happy to be with all of you here today, sharing this time and sharing this planet. I would like to start with by saying that I'm an artist, and you might wonder why an artist is speaking to me in such an event. But if you allow me, I would like to share with you my personal story, since this session is about stories. I'm an artist, and 12 years ago, I was working in the London underground tunnels, where we had a huge performance and theater venue. It was wild, it was crazy, it was a place for artistic experimentation. Every night we will open a door inside London Bridge Station, and you would enter into this parallel world deep down London town, and it was a place where magic happened. I worked there for 5 years. I have countless of experiences and stories that I would love to tell you, but I'm gonna tell you one specific one. One day, there were people hanging from the ceilings, and there were some graffiti artists doing artwork in the walls, and we had an orchestra playing while some body artists were getting undressed and ready to pierce themselves. And on the radio, I received a message from security saying that someone wanted to meet. So I ran into door number 10 and I saw a group of people, and definitely they didn't look like our usual crowd. They were properly dressed. And I spoke to them, and they presented themselves as a group of scientists that worked in the International Astronautical Federation. In other words, the Space Federation. And I was explaining to them, like what was going on in the night, and explaining why we were doing what we were doing. And at some moment, one of them stopped me and said, "Why space can't be like this? This is fresh. This is exciting." And somehow space exploration has lost that. So I said, "Call me and we can fix that out." Of course, I was joking. And they said, "Yes, we will call you." But they were not joking. A week later, I received a phone call, and they asked me to go to Paris, where the headquarters of the Space Federation are. So I took the train and I met them. And they said something very intriguing to me. They were like, "Nahum, we want to create a section for the cultural utilizations of space." I had no idea what that meant, but I knew that I had to say yes. It sounded incredibly amazing. So 12 years later, I am here. 12 years later, I've grown inside this community. As an artist, I have done a bunch of things, exciting things. I have created my own space missions. I have flown in zero gravity. I have floated with cosmonauts, making artworks, smashing a piñata, hugging my fellow comrades in flight, doing art in an environment that is unnatural to us, where there is no up or down. I have launched the first interactive artwork into the International Space Station on board a Falcon rocket by SpaceX, a huge project in collaboration with the European Space Agency, NASA, and the International Space University. In this university, I teach future generations of astronauts and space professionals art, the importance of the humanities in the space sector. And also, 10 years ago, exactly, I founded the Cosmica Institute, which I will tell you about in a minute. So 12 years later, since I started this incredible journey, I am here, standing in front of you, sharing my story. I have to confess that in the beginning, everything was wonder. Of course, I was sitting there learning all the incredible things that we were doing, with our rockets and our machines, our rovers. I was learning at the same time what has been the importance of culture, of art in this quest. And of course, I was learning. I was growing as an artist and growing as a space professional. And little by little, I started to have a different perspective in these activities. I like to think that space exploration activities are something incredible. are the limit of what we are able to do as humanity. It's about innovation. It's about new ideas. It's about the next thing that will define our future. I realize that very often societies are able to envision their future by looking at the space imaginaries. But things changed for me at some point. I started to see some opportunities for questioning, for giving a different perspective to the things that we do outside of our planet. And this is where I say that my true contribution to space exploration is actually happening. I started to challenge the stories that I hear in the space exploration community. And as an artist, I have powerful tools. Some of them very unorthodox tools. For example, I want you to close your eyes right now. Close your eyes. And as you listen to the sound of my voice, you start drifting away. I want you to breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out. And as you breathe out, you relax yourself more and more. Keep doing it. And as you exhale, you get more relaxed. And soon, you'll drift away and you'll be deep inside yourself. Okay, open your eyes. I am not going to hypnotize you now, but hypnosis is something that I've been doing for 5-6 years, so I became quite good at it. I go around theaters around the world, challenging the stories of space exploration. And we change history as it happened. How it would be if anyone like you had the opportunity to go to the moon. I've been around theaters, hypnotizing people, and planting in their minds memories of walking on the moon. When the audience opens their eyes, they remember a story of their own. And I want you to invite you to listen some of these stories.
I remember flying to the moon really well and landing.
Once I got onto the moon, I started to drift off, and the boundaries between dream and memory are very fuzzy for me.
Yeah, I was alone, but the strange part is I felt like the moon was really small. Like I didn't feel like the way you would on Earth, like the way things are just flat. Like when I was sitting there, I felt like I was on a round little ball.
So I was looking at the ground and I could see this grayish white, rocky surface.
I was floating on a little mini tin submarine, it would have been like a submarine sort of floating out in outer space, and there was no sound, and any kind of sound was just swallowed by a vacuum.
And the gravity you would feel pulling you back down to Earth, that rapid acceleration up into the stratosphere.
It was strange. I felt very light. My physical body actually felt light.
Mais j'avais pas la sensation de marcher, juste de flotter, plutôt de nager dans une matière.
Istniałam tam jako duch i latałam wokół i zwiedzałam kosmos.
But I didn't really have a sense of my body walking. I felt like a disembodied spirit just floating through these very bizarre alien environments.
I saw rainbows everywhere, which was really nice. And then, again, like the furry sensation was on the moon texture as well.
كان لون بنفسجي في الأول، بعدين تغير كان لون، بعدين لما انتهى الصوت كان في إضاءة قوية.
Yeah, on the moon I could smell the dust, you know.
Todo era como entre púrpura con anaranjados.
The sky was just vivid, azure blue, such an intense blue. And as it touched the horizon, it was sort of a pinkish yellow, but as it rose up, it was just the most intense, beautiful blue, crystalline blue that I've ever seen.
Je me rappelle d'avoir vu un cercle de lumière, une aura.
Spotkałam też jakąś tajemniczą kobietę o czerwonych włosach, z którą tańczyłam. I kiedy patrzyłam na ziemię, chciałam ją ogarnąć.
Just watching the earth, like as if I was just watching the sunset, you know? It was just like a nice moment. I was just watching the planets kind of cross.
J'étais en harmonie avec tout ce qui m'entourait, quoi.
بعض الوقت كنت أشعر بالوحدة، لكن كنت أشعر إني متصل.
I was like, I have to go back to Earth. Damn, it's really nice up here. And I was enjoying the beauty.
I think that I would have liked to stay longer on the moon, because I think seeing Earth again was a reminder that you have to go back. Like, you know that you can only be on the moon for a short amount of time. And so I think then when you see Earth again, you realize, you have to go back there.
I think I would go back from time to time, but I think that I definitely have to stay here. I got shit to do.
C'était un peu confus, mais très éclairé, beaucoup de lumière.
I feel like I must have been sleeping in some moments, I'm not sure.
These stories were experienced by a number of people around the world. For them, they happened, and it helped them to have a deep connection with the moon. But what are stories? Stories are perhaps the most meaningful and personal way that we learn about the world. We pass stories from generation to generation through our families and cultural heritage. As human beings, we engage with each other and the world through language. But also, let's remember that stories can be very problematic. Stories have been used and are being used to perpetuate certain narratives. As an artist, I study how stories are crafted and how they become part of our culture. As someone that also works in the space community, I've been paying close attention to the stories that we hear in this group, in this field. Let's listen to some of them.
I'm thinking if we're going to colonize and do something other than live in a habitat module.
Really smart people have been having serious conversations about colonizing space for a long time.
First human beings are going to be stepping on the moon or Mars or into a colony in space.
Could you colonize the galaxy in a million years? Absolutely, the entire galaxy.
These narratives are often heard in the space community. Stories of colonization, of mining resources. On the one hand, you would think that this community is developing the latest science and technology that we are able to produce as humanity, and they're doing it, and it's impressive. Just think that right now Mars is the only planet that is entirely inhabited by robots. This sounds like a science fiction book, but it's true. We are doing it, and it's incredible, and it's magical as well. But on the other hand, what cultural frameworks we are using to envision our future in the stars. We listen to colonialism. And here is where I wonder, do we really mean it? Do we really mean to go to a foreign land and claim it ours and extract and experiment and do whatever we want with no consideration for its evolutionary history, for its current state in the cosmos, for the possibilities of current life, or perhaps the traces of previous life, of contaminating it, of terraforming it? Or it's just an accident. We don't really mean it, but we still say so. But then the question is, why are we using it? The only reason I can explain this to me is that because the colonial paradigm is so embedded in our minds that we are still responding to it, and we're still planning in those terms our future. And you would say, these are just words. But I want you to join me in the next story.
The mission of Apollo Soyuz.
In 1975, the world witnessed the handshake in space, as it is known. This happened when the Apollo spacecraft and the Soyuz spacecraft from the Soviets performed a rendezvous in low Earth orbit. A rendezvous is when two spacecrafts dock into each other. They attach and then they are able to communicate. So what happened? Well, there were two parts, the female part and the male part in traditional docking systems. This meant that someone had to penetrate the other. This was a problem, of course. The Russians were not going to penetrate the Americans, and the Americans were not going to penetrate the Russians. So we had a problem. A new technology had to be invented that was called the androgynous peripheral assembly system. In this new technology, the docking can happen without having a female or a male part. In this new solution, they eliminated the concept of an active partner and a passive one. The result was a kind of sexless space hog. The motivation was clear: to avoid a macho problem in space. This is a real story, and today space technologies still use this androgynous docking system to avoid further conflict. But let's move into another story, a story that we learned when we were kids in our classrooms. I want to show you the following. This is something I used to see every day while I was in school. It was on the wall, and this is how I learned my place in the world. It's a map of the American continent. I come from this land called Mexico City today, and we assumed that this was the reality of the world I was growing in, of the world I was discovering, a world that had all these histories, all these lines, different nationalities, people from all around the world. When we see the images of our planet from space, what astronauts experience when they go into orbit, this map changes. This map is transformed. Suddenly, this happens to our histories. we see how the lines, the divisions, and the borders that we thought were real, they start vanishing. They disappear from the space perspective. And suddenly, a new reality starts emerging. A reality where our planet doesn't have these man-made borders, or as we also know them, as these imagined communities. Suddenly, another reality is revealed in space travel. A very different reality from the one I had when I was a kid back in this land. The history of space exploration is dominated by affluent and industrialized nations, often tied to military and economic imperatives. In turn, space activities and their narratives have further cemented colonial, racial, and gender orders. This legacy has left very little room for writing the new stories for our future. That's why I insist we're using ideas that are 500 years old to write the stories of tomorrow. So I want you to reflect in what stories we are crafting, we're wording, and also what stories we're dragging from the past into our future. In this event, we are here very invested and interested in innovating, in writing those new rules, those new ideas for humanity and the planet, especially in this very critical time in our history as a species and in the planetary history. So I wonder how much we have to write these new stories and how much we have to stay silent and listen to those voices that we have silenced in our history. Maybe if we start listening to those voices that have been dominated, we could learn something interesting. And in this moment, I would like to share with you another project that I've done, more than a project, a life's mission. In 2011, 10 years ago, I founded the Cosmica Institute. Imagine a space organization run by artists. That is Cosmica, an organization for the critical, cultural, and poetic discourses on our relationship with outer space, space activities, and the impact of these activities here on Earth. In Cosmica, we support that space does not belong to anyone and that our relationship with it is deeply rooted in every culture around the world. We believe that all of us have a stake in humanity's actions beyond our planetary home. But in particular, we are convinced that artists, poets, anthropologists, musicians, philosophers, and all other cultural practitioners bring unique perspectives to the debates and issues surrounding space activities. So this is Cosmica, and we've done a lot of things in this last decade, but I want to talk about just one today. In 2017, in the height of the refugee crisis in Europe, I was moving to Berlin and I had to do something about all these sisters and brothers that were arriving to Germany and to Europe. I wasn't sure what I could teach them especially given that my field is space. What can space give to these communities? Maybe they could give us something. And for a period of 1 month, we were with them. The idea was to create a space mission where we go to space and then we turn around and we see Earth rising without borders. We wanted to tell them that we are aware of how difficult it is for them to move around these imaginary lines that we have created in our planet. But however, we were there to support the idea that no matter where they are, they belong to this planet. During one of the activities that we were having in the refugee shelter, we were working with teenagers, and it was a day for writing stories. I wanted to allow them to imagine how our relationship with space would be in their minds. And there was a young Syrian girl of around 13, 14 years, and she wrote a story that I would like to read to you now. I am the moon, and I have accompanied Earth during millions of years. I've seen it changing, continents moving, and asteroids crashing. Throughout time, I have seen some tiny beings move on it. Every night they make the Earth blink in the dark. On one peaceful day, I watched a silver object dancing around me. It landed, and from its entrails, I saw 2 tiny beings walking out. They jumped around and raised a flag that made me tickle. After having some fun, they flew back home. Soon after, another group of creatures came to visit me. They walked around and collected stones and dust. After a few visits, I believed I knew everything about Earth's creatures. It was pretty simple. They all looked the same and sounded the same. But on a peaceful day, things changed. A new group of tiny beings came to visit me. But now they looked different from each other and spoke in melodies that I had never heard before. Carefully, they scratched me and planted a fragile and colorful thing. It was red and full of scent. The earthly creatures call it a rose. I called it a friend. So this was the story written by a young Syrian girl, a story that can envision the problems of the moon landings and the possibilities of having people from different parts of the world with different melodies in their language visiting the moon. It's important to listen, and it's important to pay attention to space. Sometimes I believe that space is like a black canvas, a silent canvas where there's no sound. And if we pay attention, things can start emerging. Space and its black canvas offers the possibilities to envision other stories. And this is important because if we want to live in a more just world, it's important to develop new narratives that take into consideration stories that we are not listening. Space has also revealed to me the importance of being with each other. I want to share with you the last story of today. I've been in zero gravity. I remember that I trained for being in zero gravity. I thought I was prepared to fly and float around and perform some artistic experiments and gestures. What happened is that I got inside the plane. I was there lying. The plane started to go up, accelerating. In that moment, I was feeling twice as much of gravity. I was weighing 120 kilograms. My tongue was heavy. My eyelids were falling. And then the pilot said, "Get ready." In an instant, gravity was gone. And in that moment, I was floating. And my body and my mind and my spirit experienced a state of existence that I didn't know, that it was impossible to predict. In that situation, every point of my body became weightless. I have lost this sense of physicality. In that moment, me and nothingness, me and the void, we were exactly the same thing. I just didn't feel my body. In that situation, I was going mad. And the only thing that I did was to extend my arms and embrace the first body that would be crossing my eyes. So I hugged this body. And in that act of embracing the other, I started to feel myself. And I realized that we can only exist if we are together. And I have a video of this moment. Gracias.